So here we are, 16 years later, Matthew Poitras, fourth game of his career in LA. We'll see what he can do, right? We'll see what he can do and if he can build off it. But there is a mental part of it that you kind of need that bounce to go your way to prove you belong after going through, the valley, so to speak. So I think that's going to be really interesting. All eyes are going to be on him now. I think on Saturday night, if he's in the lineup, you want to see how he looks. You want to see how he competes, because that can be this is the first real test. That's great. He gets an assist on the Frederick goal in night one, but now he's going through a little adversity. So how do you respond? How do you recover? I think it's a fascinating watch now between now and when they come back home.
Poke the Bear is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 171, presented by CLNS Media, sponsored by our good friends over at FanDuel. My name is Conor Ryan, and today we are once again joined by Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, thank you once again for coming on.
What's going on? Nice. We had a nice late night last night. It's always kind of weird when they don't play for like a month and a half, and they're like, oh, by the way, it's at midnight. You're like, oh, cool, sick, thanks.
And it's exactly what you want to a really riveting matchup against a very, very good Sharks team. A lot to digest, a lot of really good back and forth action. Poor David Quinn.
Wretched franchise.
I feel bad for, again, I guess I am slightly biased with David Quinn in terms of his BU ties, but man, that guy is now just steering a rudderless ship. He's like steering like the orca from Jaws after it's already been sunk. Like that guy. And again, I kind of felt bad. Like, again, I think the Bruins have made a very, very good call getting Jim Montgomery, but remember how much that guy got absolutely roasted by Bruins fans for out of nowhere? And now he's getting killed. Now he's mired with this awful team that is only going to get worse. You got to trade Hurdle and all those guys, which might be worth paying attention to in the next couple of months. But Sharks, not good at all.
No, not good at all. And you can see some pieces there that are going to ultimately be part of what they're doing. But, I mean, their goaltenders have just been obliterated this year, whether it's Mackenzie Blackwood or Capo Kakinen, I believe is how you say it. Yes. Not sure what we were doing last night, but that's all right. And they're just getting blitzed every night. They entering last night, the Sharks were allowing over 40 shots per game. The only team in the NHL allowing that. And of course, there's an outlier there with the 50-something shot performance from Colorado, but still, not a very good defense. Those goalies are going to get sunburns this year. And you do feel bad for David Quinn, who his 2 NHL stops now have been rebuilders, and it's tough to really carve out a strong resume unless he has the full backing, of the Sharks front office. And, Mike Greer, another BU guy, maybe believes in him, maybe believes in the long-term vision of, hey, you stick it out now and we're going to keep you for when we're good. But the Rangers kind of had something similar and they opted not to. So you feel bad for him, but such is life. There's 32 of those jobs. You got to grab them when you can, no matter what. And oh boy, does he have his work cut out for him this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, Sharks not very good, which is good news for the Bruins, who I don't think it was their best effort by any means, but still did more than enough to get the 3-1 win on Thursday night. And I guess we'll just kind of dive into some of the big takeaways from that game if you stayed up late to actually watch it. I know quite a few Bruins fans understandably knocked out for the night, but I think leading off, let's talk about James Van Riemsdyk, who, again, scores another goal, has 3 goals in 3 games now. Looked really good on that line with Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederick, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But, Ty, I'm not going to say that we were right all along, that we knew that. And I'm not saying that James Van Riemsdyk is on pace for a 40-goal season, but guy looks pretty good for especially when you look at where he was last year and what you're signing him for. Are we surprised at all that he's being a productive guy? Not a guy on pace for 80 goals, but are we surprised at all that he's a guy that looks like a competent play driver on this team?
Not necessarily surprised by the results, because I think we talked about this, but, playing on that top power play unit, and he was aligned to play with David Pastrnak and Pavel Zacha out of the gate. That's a good spot for anybody. You can kind of luck your way into 20 goals so long as you can keep up with those players and be effective in that power play role. What impressed me is doing it with Coyle and Frederick. We talked to Jim Montgomery after Monday's practice when we first saw this line together, and he said that he felt that all three players, had skill sets that maximized one another, right? And I think you're seeing that so far. Having a net front of Trent Frederick and JVR, that's a challenge for any team. Two 6'3" guys. Yeah, exactly. Two 6'3" guys over 200 pounds. And you see it. You see it last night. Frederick draws the attention of two Sharks, and then JVR just sneaks right in there and can shovel it home. And so, but to your point, to your question, maybe it's not surprising if, you were like us and didn't think that he was totally cashed. You looked at his numbers, his underlying numbers last year. You saw a guy who was still creating, but was going through the worst dry spell of his entire life in terms of finding the back of the net. So these things tend to balance out. Now, is he, of course, 80 goals a season? Of course not. But there is a natural sort of, I think, return to what he's been this year, and proving that he's not totally cashed. He's not cooked. He's still got some gas in the tank. Now, we'll see what it looks like in January and February. But right now, this is kind of what I expected in terms of how he looks and some luck turning the other way. How about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think for James Van Riemsdyk, it's not like this is a guy that, at this stage of his career, he's reinventing the wheel of what makes him great, or, he's not like a guy that generated a lot of his chances off of like his motor or anything like this. Like, this is a guy that's been great at net front for a while. And even Charlie McAvoy, I remember after Media Day, was talking about, like, you talk about players that are so good at, hand-eye coordination, at tipping pucks. Everyone mentions Pavelski, number one, right? That's the guy that everyone across the league mentions. But, like, JVR is right there in terms of just how good he's at that spot. And that's not something that really erodes in terms of just being a naturally gifted tipper of pucks, net front guy. I mean, Joe Pavelski could probably be like 45 and still probably get 20 goals a year off of just doing that, right? So, for James Van Riemsdyk, I think some of it has to do with luck, as you said, but also it's, if he's playing, sticking to his strengths, playing that same game, and he's got a stronger supporting cast around him, that helps out a great deal too. Because you'll get like Philly last year, that power play I think was last in the league. He had like, Joel Farabee, who is like a very solid middle six guy, I think on a lot of teams, shouldn't be your focal point guy on your power play, right? Like, they don't have, obviously not a Pastrnak, but you look at just the amount of people on the Bruins power play that can get the pucks to him, whether it's McAvoy at the point, Pastrnak, Marchand along the half wall. Like, if James Van Riemsdyk, keeps on playing to his strengths and doing what he does best, the pucks are going to be there. And it's the same thing even at 5-on-5. If he's sticking with Trent Frederick and Charlie Coyle, they're going to be possessing the puck. They're going to be, getting the other team getting tired legs, and they're going to generate a lot of chances. And if he's down the net front, he's going to cash in. So I agree. Like, is he going to have a 30-goal season? The Bruins would be very excited if that was the case. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. But for a guy that's signed to 1 year, $1 million, if he's on pace to giving you 15 to 20 goals, you will absolutely take that right now. I mean, hell, look at like Tyler Bertuzzi, who, again, not going to make that comparison, but if you're looking at just the basic output of what you're signing these guys for and what you're expecting, if James Van Riemsdyk gives you 20 goals at $1 million, and you have Bertuzzi, who I assume is going to have more points, but got injuries, got these other things, it all comes down to like that money ball kind of format, right? In terms of how you're utilizing that money. You get 20 goals for $1 million. I think you'd be more than happy if you're Don Sweeney and the Bruins.
Yeah, and this was the challenge that was laid out before them. They acknowledged this that in May on breakup day when we were all talking to Sweeney. He basically said, we're going to have to find guys who are coming off bad years and who are going to be affordable, and that we feel that we can, basically juice up, right? And I think you're seeing that. It's another reason why a guy like Danton Heinen is still kicking around on the PTO. It's that if he is signed, based on what he did last year and based on his career numbers, you feel you're going to get your money's worth. And that's sort of the whole name of the game, is low money, get your money's worth, and then see what happens. I mean, it's the ultimate play for any team. When you go through a cap crunch, look at the Lightning. I think that's what made the Lightning still a strong team, and maybe not so much now, but 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they would find these guys, your Corey Perrys, your Kevin Shattenkirks, your Zach Bogosians, like these guys who, maybe their value wasn't what it was 5 years ago, but if you put them in the right spot, they could still be valuable. And I think that's what you're seeing so far through 3 games.
Absolutely. And before we even move on to the next one, I think one thing that sticks out about the Bruins and how they're a really appealing recruiting team now is, I think you mentioned it, or you asked Don Sweeney, I think it was after Pastrnak signed that extension of like are teams aware of like they can come here and juice up their numbers with Pastrnak? And Sweeney was like, yeah, players talk. It's like,
Yeah.
You got a pretty good, recruiting tool right there. If you're a JVR or any guy that's fighting through injuries, having a down year, if you want to come here and bump up your numbers and set yourself up for a nice payday, it does make a lot of sense. So that's definitely something I think you're seeing with JVR, and you hope whether it's other guys they've signed to cheap deals this year or in the years ahead when they're looking to find other solid guys in their lineup for affordable deals, I imagine they're going to follow a similar strategy there. Now, moving forward to, I guess, maybe not as positive. It's only been one game, but Matthew Poitras, who, again, I think is the guy that fans are excited about, but also if he does well, your lineup all of a sudden looks a lot more coherent, or you're having a lot more guys put into roles best suited for them. But you also need Poitras to drive play himself. He was starting off the game with Brad Marchand and Morgan Geekie. Didn't do too much. I mean, I think he played under 13 minutes, 0 shots on goal. Didn't really generate all that much in this game. So, again, it's to be expected. Kid's 19. It's 180 pounds soaking wet. Are you concerned at all, Ty, with his performance in that game? Or is this what we expect, the ups and downs of a young guy kind of trying to establish himself in the NHL?
Yeah, it's going to be the ups and downs. It's going to happen. And I'm expecting him to kind of have a bit of a similar game against the Kings. You look at how deep the Kings are down the middle. That is going to be another challenge for him. Whether it's Kopitar, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Philip Deneau, even like they have some high end centers there that can make his life difficult. What I will say is that, yeah, not the best game. I kind of liked the recovery. Now, if you looked after the first period, Poitras took 6 faceoffs. He lost 5 of them. He finishes this night with 4 faceoff wins, 5 faceoff losses. So for the next 40 minutes, he went 3 for 3. So that's an in-game adjustment, an in-game recovery. And that's what I want to see. I want to see him, when he's punched in the mouth, to find a way to respond, to rebound, to do whatever. And so I thought he did that at the faceoff dot, which is going to be a ticket for him to staying in the lineup right now. Now, he's going to go through some of these, and I think the down part of it is that the Sharks are not a strong defense. They are not a stronger, they're not a team I look at and go, tough to get through that, that front. Whereas LA, I'm going to be like, this is going to be a challenge for him. What I hope, though, is that they stick with him. I really don't want to see him take a seat and have Patrick Brown in on Saturday night. Nothing against Patrick Brown, but I got to see how Poitras recovers. That is the biggest thing. Brad Marchand talked about this, is that recovery is such an underrated part of being an NHL player. And how do you adjust from game to game? How do you find consistency? So I hope they stick with him for Saturday night. I hope that they continue to utilize him. I hope that Jim Montgomery is not spooked by last night. I hope that he understands that, it is a growth process. It's going to be part of it. So I'm not super down on him. It's just, this is what's going to be. But if he has 3 more of these, I think what's going to happen is probably going to be pretty clear that he'll go back to the OHL if he's as quiet as he was. I don't think he had a shot on goal, as you mentioned. I think he had 1 giveaway, like kind of a non-factor. So you can't have 3 or 4 of those in a row. If he has a strong bounce back, be it Saturday or Sunday, you'll take that and you'll feel better about it than you do right now on Friday morning.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's something too where I think the Bruins, listen, like if the kid's not ready and he's going to continue to really struggle or not impact the game, and he's not driving play next to a guy like Marchand or what have you in the top 6, then they're going to have to make the move. But like I feel like the Bruins want this kid to do well. They want this kid to succeed, right? Because as you said, if he's all of a sudden in a spot where he can drive play in the top 6, so many other guys slot into roles where I think they're probably better suited and makes your lineup that much better. Yeah. So I think they want Poitras to thrive. Like they want him to do well. It's going to, the onus is going to fall on him to do that. But it's also one of those things where you only need, one bounce back game or one kind of strong showing. It's not like they need him to all of a sudden go scorched earth and he needs 11 points in his 9 games, right? Like I think Don Sweeney mentioned when Pastrnak had his first kind of tryout there in those 9 games, I think his last game was like that 2-goal showing. And I was like, all right, yeah, he's good to go. Like, again, it's all about, I think, how you bounce back, how you fight through these things. If he comes back and maybe he's not this bombastic guy maybe we saw in the preseason, but if he has a a nice assist there if he contributes, has some reps on the second power play unit, and just shows that he can kind of fight through these things and fight through the bumps along the way. I mean, every guy over an 82-game season goes through the ups and downs, even guys that have established themselves for a while here. But it's all about how you kind of just build off of that and kind of have a short memory, because if Poitras can prove that he stays there, I think if you're the Bruins, and I think probably at least I share the sentiment, like the lineup looks a lot more, easier to map out if you have a guy like Poitras in place, as opposed to, all right, we're going to put Geeky at 3C. We're going to maybe put Coyle back up in the top 6. I'm not saying it's going to completely hurt your team, but you can see where the pieces fall into place a lot more if a guy like Poitras is sticking around.
Yeah, and you brought up that they're going to go through these bumps and these bruises, right? And it's really interesting because I talked to Milan Lucic before the season started. Lucic broke in as sort of an unheralded or quote unquote out of nowhere 19-year-old who stuck with the team. If you go back to that 2007-2008 season, Lucic's first 3 games, he had 0 points. He was kind of a non-factor, and you were like, okay, what's going on here? His 4th game was in LA. He had a Gordie Howe hat trick. He had a goal, an assist, and a fight. And Lucic pointed that out to me and said that was kind of where he felt like I belong. Like that was his moment where he realized he got kind of out of his own head, like he was like, all right, I'm here now. And he built off it. So here we are, 16 years later, Matthew Poitras, 4th game of his career in LA. We'll see what he can do, right? We'll see what he can do if he can build off it. But there is a mental part of it that you kind of need that bounce to go your way to prove you belong after going through, the valley, so to speak. So I think that's going to be really interesting. All eyes are going to be on him now. I think on Saturday night, if he's in the lineup, you want to see how he looks. You want to see how he competes, because that can be this is the first real test. That's great. He gets an assist on the Frederick goal in night 1. But now he's going through a little adversity. So how do you respond? How do you recover? I think it's a fascinating watch now between now and, when they come back home.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely worth watching that game on Saturday night against LA. If you're going to stay up for it, I'm sure we will, but probably the biggest storyline going into that game is just how he bounces back. Before we dive into a few more topics coming off the Sharks game, let's take a brief break here and listen to some words from our sponsor at FanDuel.
Quick second here to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. Again, FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
Listen to that. It was like Evan Marinofski still here in spirit. His voice is over. It's like the voice of Ben Kenobi over us. Echoing the sentiment of our good friends at FanDuel. So shout out to FanDuel and shout out to Evan, who's probably listening in somewhere.
I can't wait to go to Maz Kanata's bar, and it's gonna find Evan's microphone. It called to you. I'm like, hell yeah, it did.
All right, so let's moving on now. Looking at another guy, we look at James Henry. Seems like someone who's provided a lot of value right off the bat here for the Bruins. But Kevin Shattenkirk's a guy that I don't think really had a impactful preseason. People are looking at him as kind of the replacement for Connor Clifton, but kind of got lost into the shuffle, I guess, in terms of preseason. People look at guys like Lohrei or the established kind of big guns further up in the lineup on defense, but I think Shattenkirk's been very solid. Like, again, he's not flashy, doesn't really do anything that really kind of stands out or makes a lot of highlight reels, but seems to be making a lot of really smart, simple plays. And I think in the offensive zone, seems to have a knack for his pucks are finding its way to the goaltending. Of course, he virtually hits Ruta and almost takes his head off on one of the sequences. But in terms of like his offensive play generation, making smart plays with a guy like Forbort, which you need that third pairing to kind of be your do-it-all grouping, right? Like they're going to get a lot of D-zone starts, but if Shattenkirk can impact the game offensively as well, you'll take it. But what have you thought of Shattenkirk so far? Because I think he's been a pretty unheralded, solid contributor right out of the gate.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that really, I think he's just a more complete player than Connor Clifton in terms of like his experience, his know-how, what he's been through. And that's not a knock on Connor Clifton, who I thought had a very under the radar, excellent season last year. I thought personally, but just a different kind of flavor on the back end, really kind of like a Nick Foligno type for the defense. And they really haven't had one of those guys, like you got to go back to like this post Chara era. Like who has been the veteran they've brought in whose voice has carried some weight? Like they brought in Dmitry Orlov last year, who's a great defenseman, but Dmitry Orlov's trying to find his fit in Boston. He can't be a veteran voice. He can't be a leader, it right out of the gate. So they bring in a guy who's been through it all, whether it's, been in St. Louis, Washington, New York, Tampa. Like he has been through pretty much everything a defenseman can at this stage of his career, almost 900 games in the league. So I really like his game. I like what he can bring with Forbort. I think it's a more balanced pairing in terms of how you can deploy them or how you expect to deploy them. So, it's definitely like a guy that I want to see. I want to see like the full assortment here, right? Like I want to see him out there with Grzelcyk. I want to see what they cook up maybe with Lindholm a little bit. But overall, I like it. And again, if we're comparing, like we did with JVR, talking about Bertuzzi, well, let's look up in Buffalo right now. Connor Clifton has 0 points and is a -5. Down in Carolina, Dmitry Orlov has 1 assist and is a -10. He's not a pairing with Tony DeAngelo. Not good for business, I hear. Not good for business. But again, like if you're moneyballing it, these are guys that you couldn't afford. And the guy you brought in is off to a strong start. I'm with you on the shots. He has a sneaky shot that he can get through. And I find that really interesting. Is he as physical as Connor Clifton? Probably not. But I think at the offensive end is where you're going to see him have a greater impact over the course of 82 games. So I like what they got there, especially for 1.05 or 1.05 million. It's pretty hard to beat what you're getting so far.
Absolutely, yeah. And seems like he's just a really good steadying presence back there. And as you said, like having a veteran guy back there who's been through the ups and downs. And this is a guy that joined a Tampa team that was coming off of the worst loss in terms of, a record-setting performance, joins that locker room the next year, and they bounce back, right? So he's kind of been through it all, knows what to say, I think, in those moments. And I think his skill sets caters to what they need out of that third pairing spot, because I feel like that's a third pairing that can kind of change as the year goes on, right? Like what you have in like Forbort, but if Grzelcyk gets bumped down there, if Lohrei shows up, you need someone in that spot. Like Shattenkirk's is a guy that I think can play a lot of different roles. Again, like is he a shutdown defenseman? No, but I think like you see in a lot of these plays, again, not flashy, but knows how to break the puck out, knows how to make those kind of simple, smart plays to get the puck moving, get out of the D zone. And I think that third pairing's been pretty solid so far. And again, it's a kind of, when you look at how much you anchor your defense towards, the McAvoy pairing and the Lindholm pairing and what they bring, you still need that third pairing to not take on any water. The plan works when all three of those pairings are playing at a high level. You can't have that grouping continue to get, hemmed in, especially at 5-on-5 play. And it really hasn't been the case so far. So far, so good for Kevin Shattenkirk, who looks like another very solid signing. And again, these guys don't have to be impact players. If you're signed for $1 million like GVR or 1.05 for Shattenkirk, if they're just solid guys that can hold their own, you will take that. But right now they're, overperforming those expectations. So you'll certainly take that. Just
don't sink the boat. That's all it is, right? And so, and I think it's really interesting, Jim Montgomery kind of said that they felt that they needed a veteran voice back there. And it's telling, it's kind of like in the NBA. When the NBA hires a guy to be your eighth guy, he's on the bench. He's your eighth or ninth guy, but he's been through the wars. He knows what to tell guys, younger rosters, when they're panicking. And think about this defense. It's still young. Like McAvoy, Grzelcyk, Carlo, Lindholm, like they're not all in their early 30s and established. Like they're still going through it. So, and you look at back what happened, right, in that playoff series against Florida where they were getting blitzed by a forecheck, and you could tell it was kind of in their head a little bit. So I think you're seeing the value of a Shattenkirk right away. And when in terms of like in-game adjustments, right? Like keep in mind, they've had to come back in two of these 3 games. Like they've been down and they've had to come back, and their defense, I think, has played a role in the 2 comeback wins. So you're already, I think, seeing his voice kind of carry a little bit of weight in that room.
Right. The Bruins desperately needed their own PJ Brown or Sam Cassell
Exactly.
in the blue line, and they actually might have it in Kevin Shattenkirk. So we can continue to build off of that. And going into, I guess, our final topic of the pod, looking at Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederic, and we kind of alluded to that with Matt Poitras in terms of how important his ability to stay in the lineup, especially in the top six, can be. I don't want to break up Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederic. Again, I don't really know what it is about those two that makes them play so well together. Like, it's not like you look at some of these other guys like, Marchand Bergeron or any of these players and where their skills complement each other. It just works. Like, there's no secret formula, what have you. You put Charlie Coyle with Trent Frederic together, you got a line that possesses the puck, makes it miserable for the opposing team, can also be a really, really good defensive stopper as well. So another, reason why you hope Poitras sticks is because I wouldn't touch that third line at all. I think you keep that line together because, again, Charlie Coyle, I think, is a guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything. But when he's in that third spot with a guy like Frederic, those guys are money together.
Oh, they're phenomenal together. I mean, the results back it up at this point that Trent Frederic makes Charlie Coyle better. And whether it's just occupying more space, clearing more space, we know how Charlie Coyle likes to possess the puck. Sorry if I said McAvoy, but anyways, Charlie Coyle, we notice that he likes to possess the puck, right? And so when you have another guy there who can just create space and open lanes up, really that third guy is going to be just in an absolute wonderland, in terms of his space and what he can do with the puck. And you saw that with JVR. You saw it with Taylor Hall last year. Maybe didn't have the goals, but man, the chances were there, And so I think that it's a combo that works. I love the size of it. I think it's a mismatch for third lines and third pairings around the NHL. I think that's where their value is. And also, yeah, to your point, you can utilize them in all three zones. And that's what I think this, you're looking at the post-Bergeron era, you really need a line that you can feel comfortable putting out there in any situation. Mm-hmm. And Charlie Coyle, you look at that line last year, by midseason, they were taking on some of the heavier assignments. They were going against Braden Point. They were going against Austin Matthews. And so if you can have that still be the case with a guy like JVR with them, that's huge. There's a sequence last night. JVR makes a great defensive zone play, pushes the puck the other way, and now they're on the attack. Like if they can just rub off some of that, that defensive zone magic on whoever they're playing with as their left winger, huge development. So yeah, don't touch them. Leave them alone. They're doubling up the opposition when they're out there together. Like, keep it. I don't care what you got to do. You want to put Morgan Geekie at first line center? Go for it. I don't care, because third line, Coyle and Frederic, I'm not touching it. It's perfect. Leave it alone.
Absolutely. And it's something too, where you look at just how things fall into place. And again, it's not like you have a Bergeron or a Krejci up top too, where it's like, you need to make sure you're not taxing these guys. You need to make sure you're not getting a lot of, they're getting a lot of ozone time. You don't really have to do that in terms of maybe maintenance for a Zacha or a Poitras if that's a spot. But man, you're going to make it a whole lot easier for those guys in these new roles if all of a sudden they can get 60% ozone time. It's not flashy. It's not glamorous for the third line or the fourth line, even when it's 20% ozone starts. But if it leads to those guys playing well and getting a lot of chances to really play to their strengths in the offensive zone, talking about Zacha and Poitras and whoever's in that top six, it makes it that much easier. And I also think you have to give credit to Trent Frederic, who I think going into this year, I was skeptical about in terms of what we saw last year and whether that was just absurd shooting percentage or what exactly he's going to be. Again, I don't know if he's going to be a 40-point guy, but he does all those little things really well. And I think you're seeing a guy that's really, really confident in how he's playing. Like, it's not like the early years of him where he had an identity crisis and it's like, all right, am I gooning it up? Do I have to be, Tom Wilson light? It's like, no, I think he knows that he can play to his strengths. He can, step up when needed, when things kind of go awry after the whistle, what have you. But he's a guy that's now, I think, confident in the offensive zone, knows where his strengths are, and knows that if he makes those smart, simple plays, they're going to lead to quality looks, especially if he's with a guy like Coyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part of it too is that, you kind of watch Trent Frederic this year. I'm seeing a guy who is shooting the puck way more than he did a year ago. He already has 10 shots on goal. He had 5 shots in the first period of Thursday's game. But, you look at him, and I think he's embraced the idea of being more of a shooting threat and not being a 1-year wonder, like many of us maybe, had in the back of our minds. Is he ever going to hit 17 goals again? Is he ever going to hit 31 points, whatever it, he, I think, is shooting the puck more. He knows what he's doing with the puck before it's even on a stick. And I think that's kind of what makes him a viable threat when he's on his game. Think about last year. He had 17 goals, only on 120 shots. Through 3 games, already has 10 shots on goal. So if he shoots the puck 200 times, he's going to hit 17 goals. Doesn't matter what the percentage is. It's yes. Like he's just going to do that. If he shoots the puck 200 times, he will score 17 goals. It's just so, and that'll be more of a natural kind of, looking line, so to speak. You won't be as worried about high percentages and PDOs and what have you. So I think that Frederic, I'm seeing a player who's really kind of coming into his own right now. And I think that, that's a complete changer for the Bruins. Like, if you don't have to worry about your third line wing and getting 15 to 20 goals out of your third line wing, that eases a lot of your problems, so quicker and and more, shot mindset. I think that's what you wanted. It's what you're getting so far.
Absolutely. So yeah, Jim Montgomery, if you're listening, I know you're a loyal listener to the show. Don't split up Coyle and Frederic. Keep it going. Keep it going right. For the long haul, please. That's all we're asking for.
We'll all buy Expos hats. We'll all buy.
Absolutely.
We'll all do it.
We'll all follow Scott McLaughlin. Another shout out, Scott McLaughlin. We'll all follow his lead and wear Expos hats and draw the fanfare of all the Quebec natives that are now currently present on the Bruins. So even Ray Borg gave a shout out to him.
I know. That was unbelievable. Ray Bork I like how Ray Bork just casually walks into practice and he's like, "Hey, Expos." It's like, oh, not "Hey, Ray Bork," just "Hey, Expos." Like, what's going on here?
Huge Vlad Guerrero fan. Everyone knows this about Ray Bork.
Right.
So
that's right.
All right. Well, I think that kind of covers all the bases for looking back at this last game against the Sharks. Obviously, the Bruins now, by the time this episode drops, will have a game later on tonight against the LA Kings. So worth monitoring that game with Poitras and all things we talked about. Ty, before we let you go, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Oh, well, always on Twitter, always on 985sportshub.com. I will be co-hosting the hockey show this weekend. So go out and download that when that is live. A little pregame listening, because Lord knows you're going to have about 16 hours before the game starts again tomorrow night. So, it's where you can find me, 985 Sports Hub, and then Twitter, X, MySpace, Friendster, whatever it's called now.
Friendster.
So we'll be on there. So, join in on the nonsense anytime. We love to have you.
Absolutely. And if you want to read any of my stuff, obviously go to boston.com, or you can follow me on insert social media platform, Twitter, X, what have you, at Conor Ryan _93. That's so you can find me and all the GIFs and other nonsense we tend to spew out during games. But again, this was episode 171 of Poke the Bear. Ty, thank you again for coming on the show. I am Conor Ryan. Thank you, guys.